Well, hello there, everybody. I'm John Mancini, and this is my friend Andrew Ysasi. How are you, Andrew?
Doing well, John. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to be here. It's great to be here after the first of the year. This is our first OxyMoron show for 2022. I have to be careful of the way I say that because I keep thinking it's 2021, and at times I even think that it's still 2020, which I think is probably reflective of how the world's been working in the last 2 years or so. So it's really a pleasure to have everybody here. We really appreciate you being here. Just as a little bit of a note on how this all works, this is a live stream. You also have the opportunity to post comments or questions, particularly if you are in the LinkedIn environment. And so please feel free to do that at any time. We usually run about 20-25 minutes. We try to keep this thing pretty informal. And what the name of the show, as you can see from the banner in the upper left-hand corner, it's all about, I've been fascinated for a long time with the fact that I've always run into two kinds of people, either these dreamer people that have great visions, but sometimes are a little short on the implementation, or else people that are very tactically gifted and then have a hard time sometimes connecting with the larger purpose of what they're doing. And so the people that can bring both of those ends together are, I've found, fairly rare and very treasured in organizations. And so, Andrew, you fit that bill. So I'm glad to have you here. So let me shut up for a minute and give you a quick sense of your background and what your current gig is and what you're doing.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be live with everyone today. And I hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan, so it's good to be inside too. My career started off in IT, being in technology, and after graduate school, I climbed the corporate ladder, if you will, and took some of the skills and knowledge and stories with me to continue to further my career. And today I am working at Vital Records Control. I've celebrated 3 years with them, which seems like just yesterday I started as their vice president of advocacy. So my responsibilities include mentoring, educating, volunteering, and lobbying on all things related to information governance on behalf of Vital Records Control. In addition to VRC, I also am a lecturer at San Jose State University in their Masters of Archives and Records Administration program. And I also run IGGuru.net and currently the president of the ICRM, which is the Institute of Certified Records Managers. So busy guy, a lot going on, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else.
Give me a sense of IGGuru.net. Tell people a little bit what that's about.
Sure. IGGuru, it's a neat story. Back in the early 2010s, which is still awkward to say, early 2010s, I was storing links on a WordPress site that I would use for content for presentations. And as time went on, people found out about my site and thought, hey, there's a lot of really good stuff here. I thought, you know what? Let's make it public. Post things, and if people watch, great. If not, they don't. Turns out they were watching, and after a few years of doing that, the old records management listserv community migrated over to IGGuru. So we tend to be the water cooler of the industry, which is a lot of fun. It's neat to post events, news, stories of individuals on IGGuru.net. It's been a lot of fun. It's neat to be in that position.
Awesome tagline, by the by, as water cooler of the industry. I really like that. So
thanks.
Tell me a little bit about. Well, let me back up a little bit. Let me give people a sense of who you are, sort of beneath the covers a little bit. What's the most surprising song that would pop up on your Spotify or Pandora playlist?
It took a while for me to think of how to, respond to this, but I'll leave it at this. With my age, it's no mistake you're going to find some early 90s rap on there, but probably the most surprising to people is the music from the soundtrack of the Twilight series. Yes, the Twilight series, the vampires and the werewolves. I like the music in that series. Movies, I could do without, but the music, a lot of good stuff there.
Wow. Oh, interesting. That is unusual. Okay. OxyMorons, as I mentioned earlier, all about the people who are able to operate at both the strategic and tactical levels, people that get things done. When you think about skill sets involved in bridging that gap, what do you think is the most important one?
This is a great question, and I think people, what makes it a great question is it can be answered in a lot of different ways to give guidance to the audience. And for me, I'm going to go with wisdom for this. And wisdom is a skill through one's career that gives an individual the ability to not only look at an issue from the bottom up, but also from the top down. And by bridging the gap between top down and bottom up and having conversations with individuals, looking at the data from both perspectives, I think can really paint a strong picture of not only what's occurring now within the organization for whatever problem, but also how that problem came to be and where you could potentially be going. Mm-hmm. So I got to go with wisdom.
So how do you think, we're both obviously sitting in home offices in some dimension. People have tried to analyze some of the books in back of me, and they mainly come back and say you have an awful lot of bobbleheads in your possession. But how do you think the pandemic has affected the priority that organizations place on security, on all those sets of issues? How has it changed?
Yeah, well, it certainly has. We heard early on, with the work from home or working remotely, where that was a shift. I think now that shift is done for organizations that could make it or had to make it. The relying on technology to solve a problem was certainly put in the forefront as a result of the pandemic. If there was any delays because of technology concerns, et cetera, those were thrown out the window because organizations had to adapt. And if they didn't, they were going to suffer. So I think that was one thing that was, most people can agree in a lot of the industries that occurred for those that could go remote. But I think what's currently happening right now, and what we're going to see more of as we see more individuals changing roles or rebooting their careers, or you see on LinkedIn some of the articles about the Great Resignation. There's going to be challenges, I would say, more for the tactical organizations or levels of the organizations to react to filling those resource gaps. And there lies going to be some more security concerns that come and go with people leaving an organization or leaving the digital ecosystem. So if there wasn't a concern, or if there wasn't a plan about how to handle data that is secure and needs to be controlled in a pretty volatile employee market, that needs to be a concern and a priority today to ensure that there isn't any loss of significant information as a result of all the coming and goings through our organization, from employees or contractors, but also from providers who are part of our digital ecosystem.
I like to think, and tell me if you think I'm just having wishful thinking here, that one of the byproducts of the pandemic has been that people have more of an appreciation for the need for asset-specific security, as opposed to just relying on big giant firewalls to kind of keep people out. Am I being overly optimistic, or is that actually occurring?
No, I think you're right. I think that there's a couple different ways to look at this from let's say from a cyber perspective or a cyber lens, where you used to have the mentality of, we have to have every asset locked down, and we have to know where our endpoints are, and we'd have to protect them, to where now with so many ways to connect to content or data, and with the various transmission means, whether it's cell, Wi-Fi, however you connect, we need to make sure that that's safe and secure and the information is protected, and we've got training and awareness. So I believe this is just my thought process, is that concept has been more centralized now to protect information at the core versus trying to control every single endpoint. Because if you watch on LinkedIn and some of the people that I follow, they'll say, look, the perimeter security, the perimeter is gone. It's dead. There's no perimeter anymore. There is no more. The firewall for everything that we have ends here. There could be virtual firewalls out there protecting all sorts of things. So you have to be aware of of what your ecosystem is and where the assets are, and those critical work streams that could contain not only financial information, but PII that could present risk to the organization. So I believe, again, that's more centralized thinking now versus trying to control those endpoints.
So my background, I think you know, and I think it's similar to yours as well, has been focused more on the content and information governance side of the equation, as opposed to the data governance side of the equation. Do you think do organizations see a difference between the two? Are the two converging? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the organization. Certainly, industries have their own take, but the size of the organizations are going to, what I find, kind of react to that differently. Where large enterprises will have a focus on the security around the infrastructure, and there may be an applications area that has focus on the security within the content or the data within the applications. So you're kind of attacking concerns on the infrastructure, whether it's virtual or on-prem, and the content. You've got security being looked at and discussed by those who should be in charge of that, or show those who are empowered to protect the information. Whether it's living in a certain environment and how it's being accessed. Smaller organizations, I don't believe they have that luxury. They have to, in some ways, rely on their provider, their software as a service provider, to provide not only that infrastructure security but also that application level security, and they're hopefully working with them to ensure that all of the security features are understood and made aware, and the limitations potentially of those features to run their business. So that's my more positive view of if organizations are taking cybersecurity serious. They're looking at it, both the infrastructure and the application layer, for large organizations. If small organizations, at least they're relying on a provider to provide both of those for them, and they know the risks associated with doing that.
There's some people now that start talking a little bit about the fact that, given the ransomware explosion, that organization and there's sort of a little bit of a well, that will happen to somebody else, not to me. And people tend to think like, oh, well, I'll just insure myself against a ransomware problem. And there's some conversation now that folks are not going to be able to use that as an argument anymore for faulty governance. Do you think that's true? Do you think that will sort of drive people to think more seriously about governance?
I think so. If they aren't now, it certainly should be. And this is where you and I can both agree that based on our backgrounds, these concepts and these ideas have been around regarding disaster recovery, business continuity for a long time. But applying those to the different technologies and how technology is used can sometimes be difficult. Those are concepts that your traditional IT department, your organization, should have and have a plan for any type of implementation that gets rolled out. If you don't, I really think you're putting caution to the wind there, and you're taking a chance. And as you pointed out, you may not have that fallback to insurance. And even if you do have insurance, that might cover some of the assets you lost and the cost to rebuild, but it will not necessarily replace the revenue or some of the lost expenses you have getting to that point. So having an open conversation about that and what that is something that every organization needs to have.
I think you have an appreciation for this, because you've been doing this a long time too. But I think sometimes about this question of scale in organizations, and there seems sometimes to be almost this feeling that there's like a magic box that you can connect up to the network, and all of a sudden you'll have governance. And I was talking to a Fortune 150 company the other day, and they shared with me one of their internal slides in terms of some of the problems that they face, and it is mind-boggling in terms of the complexity of the challenges that a global company at scale has to deal with when they think about this. And as I kind of think about this, and this question just popped up from Seth Williams. Does IG have a seat at the table when people talk about security, or do they get kind of drowned out by sort of some of the more traditional voices?
Well, Seth, welcome. Thank you for the question. I think that is to be determined. I don't believe right now that IG has a solid individual seat at the table where that individual is respected, or representative of IG is respected, and given the autonomy to be able to make these decisions. I do, however, believe that various aspects of information governance are represented at the table. There's just that lack of cohesion, or that lack of understanding of how to align priorities. And unfortunately, as we've seen with this pandemic, going back to your prior statement, the cost of convenience is something that is often overlooked. So if we rush to put out systems to make things easier for people to work remotely, or if we go through a process to rush something to market, or rush something to the end users without looking at business continuity or disaster recovery, there's a cost of that convenience that needs to be addressed later under the governance umbrella. And if it's not, that's going to be a potential risk or potential lost value of understanding what can be curated from that data. So that's something that needs to be cleaned up. And who's asking those questions at an organization? If it's not IG, then I question who would be asking those questions.
Yeah, I've seen this in other companies that I've talked to in terms of, for example, deploying team sites, willy-nilly during the course of the pandemic. The desire to, I've got to get video conferencing in place. Okay, we have Microsoft in place. Let's deploy Teams. And one of the things we're going to be talking about at the MER conference is, the byproduct of that is that you have a lot of ungoverned team sites out there. And on top of that, what you have is you're not just creating a very nice and pleasant video environment. What you are also doing is that you are creating a OneDrive site, you're creating SharePoint site, you're creating all those different manifestations of document management. And so coming back to it, I think it's really imperative what you said, that organizations need to have a seat at the table in terms of getting their arms around this in a holistic way rather than in a point way. And that's a hard thing to do. I don't mean to say that it's an easy thing to do, but it's a hard thing to do.
Sure. Yeah. And there are blueprints, there's roadmaps, there's guidance out there. But as you know, every organization is different, and what applies in one organization may not apply the other. And that's where it takes the wisdom to be able to look at those various scenarios, top down, bottom up, understand the resources that are there and what support systems there to be able to make IG work. And there isn't a flip of the switch that will do that. It does take some effort.
So this question or comment from Rich Palaria is connected with, a question that I wanted to ask, which has to do with this selling of governance in organizations, and maybe the byproduct to Rich's question is the selling of security, particularly in small organizations, who are incredibly vulnerable, when you get one of those horror, we're going to shut down your network and shut down your business and all that stuff. What's most frustrating? It seems, I know I've been doing this for 25 years now. You've been doing it a little less, but still a long time. What's most frustrating about selling governance in organizations? And how do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think anyone in any type of field that feels underappreciated, has a good answer to this one. But I think with information governance, one of my frustrations is it's not prioritized. That term in itself, information governance, means so much that when we're told no to that, some of us take it literally to saying, well, that means you believe that records management, cybersecurity, IT, none of this is important. And that's, we have to shift our thinking of that and say, look, maybe we need to explain it a little bit differently. And to overcome that prioritization issue is to say, if we don't prioritize information governance, if we prioritize, let me rephrase it, if we prioritize information governance, the risk associated with many of the other things we may be prioritizing should decrease. And furthermore, the value of the information that we have from an analytical perspective, from a business intelligence perspective, from a forecasting perspective, should increase. So as a result, everything we do should not only get better with the data we create, but also lower our risk. So that's, I feel that with information governance as a priority, we can make that substantial change. But if we don't prioritize IG, we're just kind of, taking off the little pieces here and there, and we might be making progress, but it's certainly not moving the needle that could be, moved in a much greater, over a period of time, could move much further than just by taking pot shots at certain projects.
Yeah, sometimes I think those of us in the IG community get so captivated with IG that we realize that nobody really wants to buy IG. They want to buy what IG can get you. And so, I think the opportunity that we have is that, you can't have security without governance. You can't have good customer experiences without governance of the information that drives those experiences. You can't have reduced risk in your organization without governing the information that's at the heart of that risk. And so, I think you're right. I think that flipping it on its head sometimes is helpful to, I think, get organizations to think about the fact that what they want is what governance gets you. And, and if we have to sell it by selling it through a security lens or a customer experience lens, or, God bless that, which means we have to understand those disciplines too,
Sure.
which is another aspect, I think, that's really important
right.
moving forward. So let me close out. You're going to be talking at the MER conference. What are you talking about?
Well, ironically, I'm talking about cybersecurity and how information governance professionals can understand cybersecurity concerns better, but also for those who will be in attendance who are cybersecurity professionals, understand what the opportunities an information governance professional can bring to the table to try to bring the governance to some of the ungoverned cybersecurity organizations out there. Not that they're doing a bad job. That's not the intention. It's to say how can we articulate what the benefits and the positives they're bringing to the table, and also help them fill gaps to protect the organization's information assets.
And why do you think the MER conference is important to delivering that message?
Well, I think it's important because it's one of the major industry conferences that occurs first in the year. So I know a lot of people are really excited, especially me being in the north, to get out and see people in the spring. So that's one. But the networking that is set aside is incredible. It's easy to access a lot of the attendees, and the education is always top notch. I come away from the MER every year just thinking, wow, that's more of a rabbit hole for me to go down to and explore further to help bolster my own knowledge and validate the skills that I have. So it's great to go. So I look forward to seeing everyone there at the MER.
And so lastly, Andrew, the URL for VRC and how do folks get in touch with you?
Sure. You can check out Vital Records Control at www.vitalrecordscontrol.com. And you can reach me at aysasi@vrcnetwork.com, or search for Andrew Ysasi on LinkedIn and connect with me there.
Great. Andrew, it's been fun. Thanks for being with me today.
Appreciate you having me, John. Take care of yourself.
All right. Stay safe.
You too.